Mediated conversation on SAfm.
6 minutes to 9, the time. Continue your mediated conversation around hijacked buildings. Nicolette Pingo is the program manager for inclusive cities at the SA Cities Network. Nicolette, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
This is the culmination of so many dynamics. You have illegality, violence, a shortage of accommodation, the problems of governance. How do we fix all of those problems? I mean, it's always tempting to change the law. It's tempting to say that landlords must prosecute people who hijack their buildings if they have the resources to do that. Where do we start?
Thanks so much, Stephen. So the South African Cities Network has recently released its 2021 State of Cities report. And in that report, we really highlight that across all areas where cities are facing challenges, that what we really require is the whole of government and all of society to work together. And I think hijacked buildings really illustrate that point more than anything. As the previous speaker spoke about from SERI, a lot of the complexity with hijacked buildings is really around kind of slow deterioration of buildings and a lack of active management of buildings. And we see that even in the Blue Moonlight case, where it was a number of years where there wasn't active management of the building and of the tenants and of paying of rentals, where the building is slowly lost and then it becomes very vulnerable to the type of hijacking scenarios that we heard the City of Johannesburg spokesperson speak about. So I think what's really important is that property owners are empowered and are able to actively manage their buildings, to lean on relationships with cities, to lean on city improvement districts, so working together with neighborhood institutions to ensure that their properties are well looked after and that they have good relationships with their tenants. So I think that's very, very important. On the other hand, it's important not to neglect the role of the state and the role of cities. And that's really, as we've heard, this immense demand dating back to 2015 when the City of Johannesburg developed their inner city housing implementation plan. There were around 30,000 households that are in need of this very affordable accommodation. So there we're talking around 500 to 1,000 Rand a month. And this is a market that private developers cannot go into without any kind of government subsidies. So this is really where we need to see cities playing a very active role. We need to start seeing some innovations. I mean, we'd love to see something like the Uber or Taxify of affordable accommodation, where people, especially vulnerable people working in informal situations, are able to easily access without huge amounts of paperwork, very affordable quality accommodation in well-located nodes such as our inner cities in cities across South Africa.
Is this something that government should do, or should government be enabling landlords to do it, or is there another way to do it?
So I think there's several, because the demand is so huge, I think it's something that governments and in particular cities within their human settlements departments, as well as within their social housing institutions, are definitely critical role players. I think there is a role for social housing institutions and they already play this role. And I think with some more enabling grant mechanisms, more enabling structuring of how they can develop their accommodation units, they would be able to meet this demand more readily. And I think from my experience, developers themselves, and especially developers who have stayed in these inner cities, who invested in these inner cities, they are very willing to look at models to go into this gap of very, very affordable accommodation. But they do need some kind of capital or operational grant mechanisms from government. And currently, there isn't that readily available.
So do you see any change in policy? I mean, this has been an obvious problem for many years.
Yeah.
There's also, I think what's happened is that we've become obsessed by the RDP home. And I understand that. Everyone wants your own space, a little garden, you can grow vegetables. But obviously what we need is high-rise accommodation. There's some examples of this in Joburg. You can rent apartments, a family can live there. It's relatively cheap. But we need to go up, don't we?
Yes, we need to go up, we need to compact our cities, and we need to go down in price levels. So a lot of what we find in the formal market in places like the city of Johannesburg is rental accommodation from between around 2,000 Rand a month to around 5,000 Rand a month. So we're still critically missing that very, very affordable accommodation. And there has been some really exciting policy. The city of Johannesburg has introduced the inclusionary housing policy, which I think is a very important tool, which essentially offers some incentives to developers to densify in exchange for a percentage of those units being at the affordable level within that neighborhood. So we are seeing some policy shifts, but like I said earlier, we can't deliver enough units fast enough to really tackle this issue.
Nicolette Pingo, thank you so much. The Program Manager for Inclusive Cities at the SA Cities Network. My thanks also to Nomzamo Zondo, Executive Director at the Socio-Economic Rights and